Hello and welcome back to the Hibs Observer with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Craig Nisbet, and we're going to take a look back at Hibs half season today and obviously a look ahead to tomorrow's Premiership clash with St Johnstone. I hope you all had a lovely new year. Thanks a lot for joining us. Craig, thank you for joining us as well. I might kind of stir up a real mix of emotions looking back over this half season today because it has been a bit of a roller coaster, hasn't it?
Yeah. There's some like chatting about doing this. I obviously went back and looked through the fixtures, and it's hard to believe some of them. Like they feel so long ago, especially on the recent run of form we've been on, and the way things have sort of changed in recent matches. So, I'm sure I'll be unpacking a little bit of grief here when we go back to these performances. But
yeah, I think we can call this a wee bit of group therapy to start 2025.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has been a roller coaster few months for Hibs. Before we get into it, though, just as always, a word for our sponsor. Good Vibes Giveaways are proud to sponsor the Hibs Observer and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes change weekly and include tech and gadgets, days out, weekends away, tax-free cash, and even Oasis tickets. So get your tickets now at www.goodvibesgiveaways.com. And just a wee word, just to thank everybody who joined our YouTube channel. Over 2024, we had a target of getting to 1,000 subscribers. We have now passed that, so thank you to everybody for your support and to everybody who has subscribed to the Hibs Observer website, and it's helped us continue to grow that. Obviously, the more people who sign up, the more in-depth content we can continue to provide. You can currently try us out for £4 for 4 months. You'll get everything on there, really, in our opinion. Anyway, we feel it's the most in-depth Hibs coverage around, everything from like tactical analysis, using StatsBomb and Y-Scout, exclusive interviews and features. All the news, club news is covered on there as well. We cover every single game, every single press conference. There'll be every word from David Gray's press conferences. We get interviews with players on there, match days, reports on the website right after the game, instant reaction here on YouTube straight after the game as well. So if you haven't checked us out on the website yet, but you have been just sneaking around the YouTube channel here, we do encourage you to have a wee look and see if you fancy signing up. It's, as I say, it's £4 for 4 months, and it gets you access to all coverage. So, right, let's crack on. We're looking at the last few months at Easter Road. It's going to be really a kind of discussion of a real game of two halves, this discussion, to be honest. It was obviously the summer change of manager. Nick Montgomery, he departed just before the end of last season. In comes David Gray. There's change at the top of the club as well. Malky Mackay comes in as sporting director. There's a lot of intrigue around the partnership with Black Knight FC. It was a very busy transfer window, double digits in terms of signings, a lot of players going the opposite way, and a lot of players who will probably leave at the end of this season. So there was a lot of turnover. Hibs season started early, being in the League Cup group stage because they finished in the bottom half of the Premiership last season. First couple of games relatively encouraging, but it was hard to read too much into it against sort of lower league opposition. Part-time first game was away up at Elgin City. That feels like a lifetime ago now. Games against the likes of Queen's Park, finished it off against Peterhead. And I mean, it was a case of, Craig, I think for those first few games, Hibs could only, it's that old football cliche, you can only beat what's in front of you. But they took care of most of those games. With kind of minimum of fuss, but obviously there was the game at Kelty, which kind of sticks out. And I feel like, I don't know about you, that felt as though it sort of changed the atmosphere around the team a wee bit, because it was a real bad day at the office. These results, they can happen. You've seen them happen at that stage of the League Cup. There's always at least one Premiership team, I feel, that gets caught out in one of these games. But it felt like heading into the start of the league season, and in terms of what it did, I don't think you can never tell what's going to happen in the cup draws, but ended up that because of that defeat at Kelty, Hibs ended up drawing Celtic in the League Cup and then going out at the last 16 stage. So there wasn't much chance to put together any sort of cup run there. But just as I was saying, that kind of the atmosphere sort of changed after that Celtic game, I felt, and it's taken a long time to recover.
Yeah, I was there. It was yeah, just come back from a really nice holiday in Japan, and that was my first thing through to Kelty and watch us get beat. But I think when Montgomery left, and Gray obviously did took temporary charge, and then obviously with Malky Mackay coming in, Gray getting the job. Even though I think there would be some people that were, and I was really chuffed for David Gray to get it, but you were still thinking this is a huge job to take on because the club is in a bit of a mess at the moment. But it's another manager we've gone through, another playing style, another raft of players signed, and we only really kept ourselves up and away from things because of the loan deals we got for Mizzy and Melida and for Marcondes and these guys coming in and sort of galvanising us a little bit in that second part. And the recruitment was always going to be the big thing that everybody focused on. And I think the Kelty game, a few players came in, a few things were rotated that day, and it was a really poor performance. and I feel like even though the fans were, it was almost like fearing the worst. I think basically like, oh God, like is this? I thought we were all right here. We've had a couple of good results, but we're still capable of this. I'm really, really concerned, and it probably just comes from because we've been such an uncertain club for the last number of years because of the turnover of players, the turnover of managers, and all the other stuff in between. That I think that was always going to be the theme going into the season. Is Gray? How long is he going to get? How is he going to go? What if it goes wrong? And like you say, we sort of bounced back with the win against Peterhead before the season started after the defeat against Watford in the friendly. But it was all going into that first game of the season in St Mirren, and even though we had signed players and we had signed players early, there was just really big question marks over our recruitment, which as we've seen now is they're still there, and I think as we get to January, even though January should be an exciting time, and obviously now we've restructured things upstairs, which I think will help. I just think that Kelty game it did turn things a little bit, and then I think following the start of that league campaign, it just became increasingly difficult for David Gray.
So thinking back on it now, it was 2 days after the Kelty game that Bill Foley came out and made these kind of infamous comments about Hibs not listening to us at Black Knights. So that didn't help in terms of fan base who were already now getting a bit anxious about, well, as you said there, have still got these results in us, to then have this guy who'd come in as shareholder. It was a lot of excitement around that, and basically him to come out and kind of hint that all was not well with the relationship at that point. I mean, obviously there's been kind of steps taken to sort of strengthen those ties since, but I think the timing of that just added to the feeling, didn't it?
Yeah, it did, and that was a really exciting, and it still is an exciting prospect. But at the time, you then, the thing with Malky Mackay going in, the perception from the outside was, it's an old pals act, the relationship with Malcolm McPherson and things like that. And, then you start to question, well, was David Gray the right candidate for it? Because if other people applied, who was applying? What was the process? And I think then when the recruitment maybe doesn't go as smooth or as well as you would like, and then you've got Bill Foley saying this, you start to see a real division. And you think, well, if the owners and the investors and everyone else is divided, what's going on in the dressing room? We know we've got players that are there who haven't kicked the ball in a long time and maybe don't want to be there, but are staying there for financial reasons potentially. And it just created this kind of toxic atmosphere that everybody was just becoming really, really frustrated. And I think actually the word, I think we maybe said it on when you and Matty did it, was just more embarrassing. You were just like, the club, we just shouldn't be in a position like this. And I think that kind of underlined a lot of the start of the season, and and obviously the results, which I'm sure we'll get on to just at the beginning, it just fell away from us really early on, and just made that period of time so difficult.
Yeah, it kind of snowballed a wee bit. Obviously, it started with that 3-0 defeat away at St Mirren on the first day of the season, which was obviously a real kind of body blow. And then after that, there was the back-to-back games against Celtic, which you wouldn't. A home game maybe more so. Maybe you think you could just sneak something there, but it's not games that you would in isolation expect to get much out of, but then it just sort of contributed to, it's 4th of August was the first game of the Premiership season. You've got a week later, losing to Celtic. That's two defeats in the opening 2 Premiership games. Then going out of the Cup the following week. The sort of performance against Celtic at home was pretty meek. I remember that. At least I think you go into these games against the likes of Celtic, and even if you don't come away with anything, because I mean you saw it the game. We'll get to the game at Celtic Park. In the league, even though Hibs, went down 3-0 on the day, there was a lot more to like about that performance. So it's the performance against these teams who you're not necessarily expecting to pick up points against can change the perception. But it just sort of compounded things, I feel, at that point. And then it actually took, just looking at the calendar here, there was a few games came after that, 2 each with Dundee, 1-1 away at Kilmarnock. There's obviously late goals lost in those games that brought back that that issue that we spent about 90% of last season talking about.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 14th of September that Hibs actually got 3 points on the board in the Premiership. So it was for a lot of reasons, it was a really difficult run, a really difficult start.
It was, and I think the other thing was that we were bedding in a lot of sort of semi-new players into the team. I was there on that the away game at St Mirren, and obviously we're putting the Bursic comes in, O'Hora comes in, Ekpiteta comes in, Molotnikov starts to get a run in the team, and after having quite a successful sort of League Cup campaign, and then we were still adding to the squad as the window went on, which, I think is fine. The 2 games against Celtic sort of kind of shot past us. And, we did stick with that. And we'll probably get to the moment where we had got rid of the old sort of 4-2-3-1 type of thing. And I think I felt for David Gray a lot, because I know in pre-season he had experimented with a back 3. And then I think Chris Cadden got injured, didn't he, pre-season? Which then meant maybe we don't have quite the players and that we want to use, and guys like Rocky, who have now become quite a key feature, were sort of frozen out and not really getting a look in. And he was obviously wanting to give Ekpiteta and O'Hora time to bed in and things like that. And it just sort of felt like he had so much to juggle. He had to get results, he had to bed in new players, he had to try and get a tune out of players that had been there but weren't getting a game and didn't want to be there. And you were really questioning, is this just too much too soon for him and the coaching staff? And and obviously the games against Dundee and Kilmarnock, if I remember that one, we lost the goal to Tiffany quite early on, and then Boyle and obviously Kieran Bowie, who when he came on in his cameo against Celtic at home and sort of ragdolled Carter Vickers and rattled the bar, you were thinking, oh wow, what have we signed here? This is what we've been needing. And he gets the goal, and then again we lose that late goal, and then that became the thing about the team. It was like, how are we, we'll find a way to lose this. And but then as players, some players then started to settle and things like that. And I do think that's been the theme of the opening part of the season, is apart from these last sort of 4 or 5 games, is that every game there was either a massive individual error, somebody getting sent off, or people picking up an injury. And it just meant we had no consistency at all. And Gray was experimenting, trying people in different positions and then trying to stick with people through difficult times. And, I'm sure he's learned so much in that period of time, because it was so tough. And then I suppose the other big thing that happened in September, I'm sure that's when Ian Gordon did his Sky Sports sort of interview.
Just into October, I think that was. It was right about that time. Yeah, I think we might have been into October by that point. Yeah, but not far off.
No, and we got the win, like you say, against St Johnstone, and you were like, right, a bit of a turning point there. I'm sure that's like Boyle got off the mark, and Kurevich got his goal and stuff like that. And I think we followed that up with a defeat to Rangers, but a decent performance. I think Tom Lawrence scored a peach that one, and we missed a penalty. And overall, though, we actually were in quite good shape, but we just couldn't then. That next game against Motherwell at home was dreadful. Dundee United away, where we collapsed from being 2-1 ahead.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like that Dundee United game, to be honest.
No, And there's been lots of moments where I've been like, that's close to rock bottom. And I maybe felt the St Mirren defeat or the Dundee defeat later on, but I sort of felt that Dundee United game was really like, you were really questioning like what is going on. Because, it was just so ludicrous the way that game, we lost that game. We then went on a couple of draws against Hearts and Ross County and Dundee United. So we sort of like stopped the bleeding at that point and at least started to get some points on the board. And then again, it was just that thing. As soon as we looked like we had a bit of progress, it was that home defeat to St Mirren, which was a really, really bad performance. And then obviously the game against Dundee, where again, you pick up another card and the game slips away from you despite making like a semi-decent start in that. So, up until that point in November, there was probably a lot of questions around David Gray, I would think.
Yeah. Well, it did start to get to that point. I feel as though it was hard to see where the turnaround was coming from. You look back at it now with maybe the benefit of hindsight, the benefit of a bit of time, and obviously the benefit of what has happened since. There were kind of areas that you could point to that you were saying like Hibs maybe started well in games, played well, and then there were and other moments, and then they were just cost by individual errors. But it just seemed as though, I think the kind of phrase they used to say was kind of stopping the bleeding. It's just they couldn't stop it. They just found other new ways to reopen the wound, if you like. And it did get to the point where David Gray, I think Patrick and I were talking about this the other day, where he was, post-match interviews, it got to the point where he was being asked, do you expect to see the next game? I think that is how kind of low it sunk at that point, where it was. It wouldn't have, we can sit and debate whether it would have been the right decision at the time. Obviously, he's kind of proved a lot of people wrong over this last time. But I think if it wouldn't have been that big a surprise, considering the club's history of going through managers, if they had pulled the trigger, say after the Dundee game or even that game at St Mirren.
And that's what
St Mirren. Sorry, I should have said.
But that's where it's been quite. And I think we said loads of times on the podcast, like it was hard to judge him because we just kept, like he got in it. Like Kieran Bowie gets injured on international duty, like playing 2 games in a short space of time. Like how unlucky can that be for us? Then all these red cards and these decisions that, listen, no players want to go out and make those decisions, but they just kept happening. And I think the other big thing as well, like Aale Youan getting injured early on in the season before it really got going, and the whole stuff around if he wanted to be there or not, and even how he was deployed early on. We spoke about like he sort of got a half against St Johnstone and went off at half time, and then he came on against Rangers, and then he never played against Motherwell. It was like a really weird sort of time for him when we were like, we need this guy to get us out of this mess. We need players like him firing, because we just don't have enough at the top end with Kieran Bowie out and Boyle struggling for form, Kurevich, also struggling for a bit of form as well, and Dwight Gill being signed but maybe not being quite up to speed and things like that. So he just had so much going against him. But maybe the status he has within the club and the respect that he had for the fans, it was the first time the fans were really not turning against him. It was more the board and the club in general, and it was more feeling sorry for him. And I think that probably bought him enough. And what was interesting, which I think we spoke about before, was the players were coming out almost going like, give him time. Like we are tight, we are a group, we want to work for each other, we're enjoying it. We all, I think everybody doubted whether that was true or not. But we've seen him. If we're talking about a turning point, it probably is the Aberdeen game at home. And that's where you first saw that, like, oh, yes, they want to be here. They're playing for each other. They're throwing themselves into tackles. They're celebrating. And just that, I think, was a massive moment for us in the season. And just to show that we could, we know we can throw away a game. That's like we've established that, but we can grasp a game back. That was a big moment for, I think, the players and I think for the supporters as well, and made that connection, because we just hadn't had anything to celebrate with them. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the big thing.
Yeah, because I again, just before I go on like that, Aberdeen, I know I've already said it about the Dundee United game, but never seen anything like that either. So to have 2 games like that in half a season tells you kind of how much of a roller coaster it's been. But I think you're right there that the fans just didn't have anything to sort of latch onto. And, I think it doesn't take, I think people go on and talk about football fans being demanding and too demanding at times or too fickle. But at the same time, the other side of that coin is I don't think it takes an awful lot to get people on side with a team. There might be, people might have issues with the club at large, but I think in terms of the players on the pitch, I don't think it takes, you don't have to move heaven and earth to get the fans on the side of the players on the pitch. And I think it just took that one game, didn't it? That Aberdeen game. And you mean it was one of those kind of inexplicable games of football, but it kind of in a night, it's sort of, I think you've seen the relationship build between players and fans over the last few weeks, especially. But in a night, you kind of sensed it not, slightly starting to turn, even though it was, seconds away from another disaster.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I've been to loads and loads of games in my time, but that I've never seen anything like that. In terms of just maybe I suppose when that game at Falkirk in the semi-final, that game knocked me off my feet. I think many years ago now when we were 3-0 down and 1-4-3. But and the context of this team, it was just obviously going ahead. Aberdeen second half made their changes, went a couple ahead, and then Nicky Cadden, who, again, it's probably worth mentioning him that he came in and needed time to get up to speed.
Yeah,
and
he got a wee injury as well.
Yeah, he got a wee knock, and that made it. And obviously, at the time, we weren't quite sure what we were getting there, but now we've grown to see that this is a player that can seriously do some damage in the league. And seeing him step up and hit that free kick, and then again to lose, I thought you were like, I can't believe that. And I always wonder if Bashiri doesn't put that goal, and even for Rocky getting that goal was massive as well, because he is someone that's divided the fans a lot, and he's had some awful things happen to him while he's been at the club, and he's been ridiculed quite a lot, and I'm sure he's had a really tough time. And he was sort of, even though in Gray gave a lot of players second chances and run-outs and things, he was one that never really got that. Ekpiteta, O'Hora were signed, and that was the partnership. Iredale's come in, and Rocky was, kind of frozen out a little bit. And even just for him coming back in, Dundee game being a bit of a disaster, with Obita's red card and the way the game panned out after that, and just for him to get the goal that salvaged things and turned things around, I think is really, really nice. And that probably stuck with a lot of the fans as well. Do you know what I mean? It's someone that they'd written off, come back in, and his performances since then have been brilliant. So that game, I think now we kept saying, is this a turning point? Is this a turning point? I don't
think anybody, I think people were too scared to say it was, because you almost like so. It's a tempting fate kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to, and David Gray, I think you mentioned about him in the press conference and stuff, he's always been really open, really honest. He's never skirted away from anything. Even when we've won games, he's went, we've not actually played that well. We've played better and lost and stuff, and he's always really honest. And I think that the Aberdeen game to then follow up with like a really comprehensive Motherwell win away from home, it was like, right, we can snatch a game from the jaws of defeat. Now we can go out and wipe somebody off the table 3-0 and not concede a goal. We can keep a clean sheet. And you could just see us evolving. And even though the next game was that 3-0 defeat at Celtic Park, the performance was brilliant. We had so many chances. We did well against them. We see what they're like. They've not lost the game. Like, they pick teams off, no matter what you do. And we had big moments against them. And then it was like, well, hold on, now we can go and match that team. We can go toe to toe with them. And you just seen every week, we almost just ticked another thing off the list of what the team could do. And you can just see them since then just growing with so much confidence.
Yeah. And the Aberdeen game was obviously a highly significant moment. But I suppose the other thing that sort of catalysed the turnaround has been the change of shape. So it's Gray I don't want to say, it feels like doing him a disservice to say he's just happened upon a solution. But Marvin Ekpiteta getting injured, this was another sliding doors moment. It forced him to rethink, and it forced him to go back to the drawing board almost and say, like, look, what are we going to do here? We're going to have to find a different solution. And it could have been, he could have just stuck with the shape and just changed the players. But he's obviously went back and really thought about it and said, like, no, we need to try something different here.
Yeah, and it's crazy because Ekpiteta at the early part of the season,
he was Hibs' best player for a few weeks before he got injured, wasn't he?
Aye, it's crazy because again he started the season off so shaky. He had the error against St Mirren, he had a couple, and then he grew into like being like, right, he's probably our best defender, and then he gets injured, and then we as you said, he has to, because I think Obita gets suspended against from the Dundee game because of that red card and that defeat. Then against Aberdeen, we're going, right, well, what are we going to do? And then Iredale, who was kind of like a forgotten signing really, because it came quite late and there wasn't so much about him, even though I think we touched on in the podcast, every time he came on, he looked quite good on the ball. We did adapt. We changed to a 3. I think in one of the games we went to 3 at the back just when we went down to 10 men. And and he did say, I'm sure when Patrick was away with the pre-season, like he did want to be able to adapt and play a 3, and I think he did it against Elgin, didn't he?
It was first game of the season. It was a back 3.
And it just it certainly he may have stumbled on it through all the other stuff that's going on. But what I think they've done in the last sort of 4 or 5 games is we really perfected it. Because just like if switching to a back 3 could save you, every team would just do it. So
it's not as simple as that.
It's not simple. It's a fact that he's able to, like, the way we're now kind of set up, and and he's had to deal with stuff like Nicky Cadden was doing quite well in those more advanced roles. Now he's been deployed as a wing back, which is a slightly different demand for him, and it means Obita, who's been fairly consistent for us, now drops to the bench, which is quite a big decision in itself. And when you do play with the wing backs, it means that you're then thinking about your front 3, and it means Martin Boyle, for example, and Elie Youan, like, no, you can't be a left or right winger anymore. You're going to need to play as a front 2, and you're going to need to press as a front 2. And well, who do you play as a number 10? And obviously I really enjoyed that piece about Josh Campbell and being so open and honest about his form and things. A guy who started off, fell away, and has now come back in and been a big player for us. And it's just it's crazy to think all that's happened in half a season. It's just, there's been so many players written off who have come back, and do you know what I mean? It's been crazy. And I do think where David Gray deserves a lot of credit and him and his coaching staff is they've got this system, and in quite a short space of time they've managed to get some really good results and performances and games that teams, like the amount of Jambos and stuff who have went, now you guys deserve that, played us off, you deserve that. Simple, even when we beat Aberdeen, not fair enough. And I think that's the thing, we've not fluked anything. We've actually went out and performed well and got goals and at good times, and David Gray and made subs at good times, and we've adapted. And I think that's where he deserves a huge amount of credit.
Yeah, because he could have went under, really. It looked kind of bleak. Certainly, after that St Mirren game and the Dundee game. So just with that in mind, with the kind of amount of sort of strife, if you like, that there was in those first few months, how heartening have the last few weeks been for you then?
They've been brilliant. I mean, again, they've not went without, like Ross County, going a goal down after 2 minutes at home. You're like, oh God, like what's, surely not. And again, the team, but there was a bit of like when that goal went in, the fans were almost getting behind the team, being like, no, we can get through this. And I think, those last, like to go on like when we looked at the fixtures, looking at, looking at the Motherwell game and then Celtic, County, Aberdeen, Hearts and Kilmarnock, we were sitting in the pub going, God, how many points do you take from that? I mean, if we could get 6 or maybe 7, get a draw here, and then that'll get us out of trouble. And the fact that beating Motherwell and then that loss to Celtic, the fact that we're able to bounce back and win the next 4 with a derby in there, away derby, away to Aberdeen as well, who had been flying high, and then obviously the result against Ross County at home and grinding out the result against Kilmarnock as well. It's just showing, like I said, about ticking things off. It's just showing that team evolving a little bit. And, as we go into January and obviously St Johnstone game and things like that coming up, it's now for that team to just keep that consistency and for the players that I'm imagining we'll do a little bit in January, and for these players to come in and that system to evolve a little bit, because I do think against Kilmarnock we've seen that actually it's we're not quite fully there yet, in terms of how we play when we've got a lot of the ball compared to when we don't. So there's work to be done, but quite excitingly, you've got Ekpiteta come back, you've got Bowie to come back, you've maybe got some business in January as well, which is always exciting. So you're starting to look forward now, and especially with the results pulling you away in the table, you're starting to look upwards and forwards rather than worrying about where you are. But what I would say is the league has been crazy this season, and
it always is, really, isn't it?
You could lose a couple of games and suddenly be back in relegation trouble. Do you know what I mean? So it's one of those things. I know from how pragmatic he is, and he seems to have his feet on the ground, David Gray, that he'll not be getting carried away at the moment.
Yeah, because he knows he's played in the league for years. He'll know inside out how quickly it can change, and so we've now got this game coming up, St Johnstone away, and it's going to be a test. You've kind of alluded to there about quite figuring out the shape when the onus is on Hibs to break teams down, and it's probably going to be like that to an extent against St Johnstone. I know they have changed their style under Simo Valakari. They are a bit more progressive, if you like, a bit more attack minded than say under Craig Levine. So, I think you'd still think the onus will be on Hibs, but it's an interesting game in that sense, because it's going away from home against a team at the bottom of the league, but they're probably going to try and have a bit of a go, you would think.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I caught like a bit of they rested quite a lot of their players against Celtic, didn't they? Like Sidibe didn't start, Dre Wright didn't start, Kimpioka didn't start, I don't think. So they were maybe looking at that game going, we'll get through that, and they were only 1-0 down, I suppose, at half time, and then made some changes. So, they'll be going into the game at home, and we're obviously on a great run of form. They're not in such good form, but it's always a place I feel that we've struggled over the years. We've just always been somewhere that it's never been an easy game for us. So I think there will be, I think maybe the way that they've adapted and starting to play does maybe fit into our hands a little bit in terms of being that team that are able to go on the counter attack and things like that. But I suppose, as we've touched on, with we are carrying a couple of knocks.
That's the thing now, isn't it? They are kind of mounting up a wee bit.
They are,
but you don't know how we don't really know at this point how kind of serious they are. I think Kukarevich and Rudy Milotnikov aren't far away at all.
Yeah.
But I think just some of the it's a few of those ones at the back, they are just kind of mounting up, as they tend to do it this time of year. It's just a case of trying to get through it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think obviously going out the Kilmarnock game, Newell went off and from just be like at the gate, it looked like a groin had been the thing that had been forcing them to go off in the last couple, but it looked like a dead leg, or from the tackle anyway, it looked like he was sort of limping from that. I could be wrong, but him picking up a knock, and obviously O'Hora, then Iredale had big bag of ice wrapped around his foot when he was on at the end of the game as well, and Aale not being in the squad as well, having a knock. So we've been doing really, really well, but we've had quite a fit roster to kind of get us through that. And I think the more you take away and chip it away at that, that becomes tricky. Do you know what I mean? For us to go, there's some subs there you can do. Like, you could put Obita in for Iredale, and you can put Kwon in for Newell, and Miller can come in for O'Hora and stuff like that, which is fine. But that means you've got nothing off the bench then. The bench starts to become a bit frail and not have as much there to change the game if it's not going your way. So hopefully those guys can pull through and be ready for the game.
Yeah, so we shall see. The team gave David Gray picks at McDermott Park. Do tune into the Hibs Observer for that game. We'll have all our usual coverage pre and post-match. But for now, folks, we're going to let you go. Thanks again for joining us. And again, thanks for all your support throughout 2024. We do hope that you stick with us into 2025. If you've not subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, please do consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps us to continue grow the channel so we can keep bringing you this content, and also you'll get a notification every time we go live. So please do consider that. Craig, thanks as always for joining us, and thanks for joining us as well, folks. We'll speak to you again very, very soon. Cheers.